Hey, Leanna, should say aloha. Happy Aloha Friday to you.
Happy Aloha Friday to you too. You are calling in from a very exciting place. I've only
I'm,
been there
I'm
once.
calling in from Kaneohe, Oahu this morning.
Wow, that must have been beautiful to wake up to.
It's always a good thing to look out to see the tree and see the trees and the sunshine, or
Mhm.
as it is today, the rain, and have a good time.
Yeah. So it's been like a hot minute, I think, since we spoke. Maybe it was way back when we were on Clubhouse more often, but I just really appreciate the chance to catch up. I know wow, you've had like so many big announcements and like big changes. Catch me up on what's going on.
Yeah, there's always the day-to-day fun that I have. I'm an accelerator for J Abraham, so I'm director of programming. So what that means is when
Congratulations, by the way, that's huge.
yeah, thank you. And so what that means is I teach courses on his content, or when people have questions about what's going on, we'll
Mhm,
bring people in for a group and then work with them on training. And so, I've been a trainer for the past 15 years, so it's a natural thing for me to go and say, okay, here's where this works, and I can see where you're struggling, and here's how we fix it.
mhm, yeah. So so it's like if you said so people, like, have gone through Jay's material and they just need a more in-depth help with it?
Yeah, so like there's people who sign up for coaching with him or training
Mhm,
with him, and
mhm,
that's one of the things that I do.
mhm,
So it wouldn't just be some random person off the street hitting me up, "Hey, Scott, I'm kind of stuck."
right. And I think what's really special about it is, I mean, you know Jay Abraham personally, you worked with him personally, so it's I think you're the perfect person for this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
yeah. So what else are you up to? Like, you're always up to so many different things.
You know, I'm completing a book.
Uh-huh.
I've had this goal to have 3 books out by the end of next year, 3 books completed.
Okay.
So I wrote a book on creativity. And so I get asked a lot, Scott, how is it that you come up with content on the fly, or how is it that you come up with ideas on the fly? And so, I looked at it and I said, how could I help somebody get what they need when it comes to being creative? Because so many people get blocked.
Mhm.
They start finding reasons why something won't work. They're like, oh, that'll never work. So I came up with, I think it was 135 different ways to be creative.
Wow. Okay.
And so the concept of the book is like the first 5,000 words is an explanation on creativity,
Mhm.
and then the next, let's say, 137 chapters are just different ways for you to find some mojo, to find some juice, to find something to get done.
Okay. So if this was like, for example, like if I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, for people who don't know, Scott, I came to Scott like a while ago because I needed creativity help too. I think I said, oh, I had to run a YouTube campaign and I said, and my YouTube guy says, you have to give me like 10 videos. And I said, I have no idea what to write.
Yeah,
And you came out with this amazing list that gave me like 200, 300 ideas, which was
sure.
really, really easy to follow. So is this a
Yeah,
similar approach?
no, completely different.
Okay.
I pushed myself to go on the creativity level, to go completely opposite of what everybody was expecting.
Mhm.
And it would be meant for a marketer who's like, I want to come up with a campaign.
Uh-huh.
It could be for someone who wants to come up with a product or service, somebody who wants to write about a book.
Mhm.
It like if you need to be creative, it was just, here's a way to be creative.
Okay. So give me an example of so it sounds to me it's almost like creativity on demand, right?
Yes. Yeah, like
So
here was the premise. You
okay.
you have to be creative.
Yep.
You go to the book and you flip it open into any chapter and you do the exercise.
Okay.
And there you go. There, everything's ready to go. So I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I get asked to work with companies to facilitate ideas and creations. And so what happens is we get stuck in the mindset of it'll never work.
Mhm.
That's like the first thing that everybody's like, that's a crazy idea. It'll never work. And so we look from the aspect of a critic instead of looking at from success from the beginning.
Mhm.
So let's say that you have an organization, and you can do this as a singular person by yourself, by the way, and you're trying to solve a problem. Well, because everybody's saying it'll never work, the ideas never flow. So I just say let's take the concept from stand-up comedy of let's go to crazy town. Let's write down everything and every possibility you could think of why it may work or what it may take to make the process or just crazy ideas.
Mhm.
And there becomes a point where there's synergy that happens and then ideas start flowing. And then once you're out of ideas, then you go back and you figure out what you're going to remove from your prospects or from your ideas. So what I normally do is I grab a whiteboard and I'll say, let's just come up with ideas. And then people will say, oh, it'll never work. I'm like, okay, time out for the next hour. You there's just just say it will work. Let's just
Okay.
let's just let's just
Like,
pretend that it's going to
suspend
be
your disbelief, right?
just
Just, okay,
suspend
pretend
it
it's
some
gonna work.
and then people will start, hey, and you'll get going, and about 5 minutes in somebody will forget the rules and they'll go, that'll never work, and we'll go, time out, you got to remember the rules. Just go with it.
Mhm.
And then what happens is now that we've gone to crazy town, now we need to put some structure to it after about an hour. So if it let's say it was you, let's just
Mhm.
say it was Leanna Ling, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
I want to come up with content. You would grab a blank piece of paper,
Yep.
and paper's better than a computer for some reason. And you just start writing out your ideas, and the natural hesitation for you is to be, this won't work.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So whether it's a group or an individual, you got to fight that it won't work. And then you just come up with ideas and say, like, for an hour, I'm just going to write things down, whether I like them, whether I don't like them. I'm not going to critique them, even if I spell this wrong.
Mhm.
And then after an hour, you go, okay, what groupings, because creativity is taking two ideas and meshing them together, two or three or four ideas and meshing them together.
Okay.
So what two or three or four ideas would work together? And sometimes you're going to be like, this crazy idea right here would never work on its own. It wouldn't work standalone, but
Mhm.
when you combine it with these two or three things, it would.
Okay. So, yeah, I can see that. You're basically trying to take away limiting beliefs, right? Like any type of limitations there, and just to free yourself from
Hmm.
consequences, from, like, judgment, right?
Yeah.
Everything like that.
And so what happens is, whether it's you by yourself or whether it's you with a group or whether someone's working this through with you, like one to one or one to many, the same thing happens. There's like the momentum phase is slow, and then
Mhm.
all of a sudden you hit a stride and you come up with all sorts of stuff. And
Mhm.
then, like, after about an hour, you're like, okay. And this does take concentrated effort.
Mhm.
And then you start figuring out, after you've come up with all the ideas, what would work together,
Mhm.
what just wouldn't work at all. And you keep the scraps, so you keep the notes, you type them out, because at some point, whatever you combined is going to not work. It's just a natural constraint. So then you could take that scrap information and go, okay, what is a possibility from the information that I've already discovered?
Sure. Okay.
So so it's just a different way to look at, like, how can I make something happen? How can I get momentum flowing? The toughest thing for a lot of people is everybody believes they're not creative. And
Right.
I'm gonna use this qualifier because almost everybody tells me, Scott, I'm not creative. I'm like, okay, let me give you some examples. Liana, I call you and I say, Liana, I know you're in Toronto and I know I'm in a suburb somewhere near you, but I need help moving this weekend. And your brain just went on creative mode because you're like, I don't want to help Scott move. I like him, but I don't want to help him move.
Right.
I don't want to help him move. So yeah, there's a bee attack planned. There's going to be a whole bunch of swarming bees. Sorry, Scott can't do it. Okay?
Right.
Like, that's a creative spot.
Okay.
Or everybody says, Scott, I'm not creative. I'm like, great. You ever been pulled over? And they said, yeah, I've been pulled over. I'm like, well, okay. What happened when you got pulled over? You started thinking of all the reasons why you were speeding or all the reasons why you ran the stop sign.
Right.
And hey, a meteor attack, sorry officer, there was flames coming from the sky. Every single one of us is creative. And
Mhm.
if you've got kids and kids ask you a question that you're like, I really not appropriate to answer that just yet, you're not old enough. Parents get creative all the time, so everybody's creative. They don't recognize where they're being creative,
Mhm.
and they've never really had some constraints put around how to be more creative. There's a
Right.
long answer to that one question. There you go.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So then once you have this sort of big basket of ideas, like how do you have criteria in terms of just how you call it down to like once you get out of creativity mode, then I guess you have to put your logic hat back on too, right? To see like is this even possible?
Sure, there's refinement. You
Mhm.
go through just every process gets refined. I know you do advertising and ad buying.
Mhm.
And so you may come up with a couple of different ideas and then you look at them and say, based upon what I know, this won't work.
Mhm.
But the one thing that I would say is, sometimes allow yourself to go to crazy town because that one idea that doesn't seem like it's going to work is going to be the reason why it does.
Mm. Okay.
And so attention, like if you want to hold attention, that comes from something different. Not every time, but like that's kind of unique. So in 1986, there was this band called the Beastie Boys. Maybe you've heard of them. I don't know
Mhm.
if you have.
I do.
And when they came out, uh, Rick Rubin, I think, was the guy who produced him, if I remember correctly. And he said, "Look, when it comes to music, you want to find a sound that's completely different than anything out on the market." And in '86, Beastie Boys was completely different. So anytime I'm thinking of a product or a service, I'm like, what would Rick Rubin do? What would Beastie Boys do? And if you look at their different sounds of their albums, they completely changed over time.
Right.
License to Ill was completely different than Paul's Boutique,
Mhm.
and then which was completely different than Hello Nasty. And so they completely reinvented. And so like when we talk to people in marketing about split testing, people are like, "Well, let me split test this ad, and one will be blue and one will be red." And I've heard somebody say screams, not whispers. And so sometimes when we're looking for the idea of creativity, the problem is we pre-frame it and think like this is what we're going to do. This is the direction that we're going to go. So we have bias towards it. And
Okay.
this is me too. Like I'm pointing to myself saying I do this myself. And so sometimes, you just got to take the opposite approach and do the thing that you think like this one's crazy. This one's out there. So let me just test it. Let me throw a
Mhm.
couple of dollars to it. Not the whole budget, but just some of the money
Mhm.
and test this idea. And pretty much any idea that you have or that I have, we can go to the market with. You could buy some Google AdWords, you could buy some Facebook ads, some LinkedIn ads, some over the top ads. I mean, like you could literally test anywhere. And if it doesn't get traction, you're like, okay, it didn't work.
Right.
All right.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so to long way to answer your question, yes, there is a refinement process.
Mhm. Yeah.
You can go super logical, which is like, well, based upon the calculation of the sun minus the moon, we got this answer. Or
Mhm.
you can go, hey, like I'm just gonna throw it in mixing in music. The producers always say I'll fix it in the mix, which means I'm gonna fix it on the fly. So
Sure.
like so one of the ways to deal with creativity is like I'm gonna fix it in the mix. I'll fix it on the fly.
Yes. Yeah, that's a
You
lot of
know.
us entrepreneurs just do that, right? You just
Hmm.
jump in and
Yeah,
and same thing with sales too, right? You just jump in, you're like, "Close it, we'll figure it out later." So
that's so true.
yeah, that's right. Oh, that's so interesting. So that's your first, but it also kind of reminds me of the inversion technique, right? Where, and maybe it's sort of like I think it's still being creative brainstorming, but they want you to think of all the negative things that will happen. So
Sure.
it's like, how do you break the company, right? And then just like
Hmm.
brainstorm like crazy. And then it gets you to think positively. So I guess it's a similar thing where again, like you're just trying to throw everything on the paper and then kind of deal with all the pieces afterwards.
If you go through a list of everything that you have to be creative of in a day, it would
Mhm.
boggle your mind. If you play video games, you got to be creative.
Right.
Uh, you may not know this watching this live stream right now. My headset wasn't working when we first started. I had to be creative and go through the settings and figure it out. Like for a lot of us, we define creativity as like come up with an idea on the fly, not how do you solve a problem.
That's true. That's true. No,
Yeah,
yeah, I guess I'm usually thinking about it like testing and figuring stuff out, but you're right. I mean, some of the most technical people have to be extremely creative when something isn't broken. Like you just have to think outside of the box, right? And
yeah,
just keep testing and going through everything. So, yeah. So that's your first book. You said you have two more books on your goal. Like, do you
yeah.
have an idea of what they're going to be, or you've written them already, or you've?
I've started on the second one, and the third one's pretty much. I've started on the second one. That one's done. About 5,000 words to type,
Uh
and
huh.
then the third one. So the second one's on rejection.
Okay.
right?
which
So
you
like
know a lot about because you've done, like, a ton of training in sales.
yeah, yeah, and so like what's really weird is when you go through and you go to like Amazon.com and you look up books on rejection,
Mhm,
there's there's probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 books the last time I looked, which was about a year and a half ago. There might be more. But there's 10 or 15 books on rejection about business rejection and relationships. And then there's probably like 20 books on there about rejection of religion. So what's really weird is like you're thinking rejection of religion. I was like, okay, there's not a lot written from the perspective of someone who's worked with salespeople who's had to deal with rejection. Um, my friend Rachna Jain wrote one as a psychiatrist, and it's a fantastic book. I'm just like for the realm of information out there, if you're struggling with something, there's not a ton of information on rejection.
mhm.
And then the third one is on word tracks for salespeople for scripting. So
Okay.
like it's an eclectic mix of like what's Scott gonna write about? We got
Yes.
creativity, we've got rejection, and we've got
Mm,
sales word tracks.
mm. So what's your approach to rejection? I'm just really like, what how do you think you're gonna use it and, like, how people can leverage it?
You know, when you take a look at the reason why people don't implement, let's say that you and I'm doing coaching with you, and I give you an assignment. I need you to
Mhm,
come up with like 4 different ad sets. Well, for some people that's really hard because they want it to be perfect. They want it to be amazing. They want it to be fantastic, not realizing that there's a natural process of destruction in everything that we do, and there's elements of rejection everywhere that we go. And if you don't believe me, are you going to drive anywhere today?
no.
You're not going to. You going to drive anywhere tomorrow?
No.
Are you planning on driving anywhere? I'm being rejected right now, just so you know. Are you planning on
No,
driving at all this next week?
probably no.
Next month?
I don't know.
Are you planning on taking the subway?
No.
Are you planning on taking
I
an
don't like
Uber?
to go outside. Okay, probably Uber, yes.
Okay. So has there ever been a time where you go to take an Uber and you hail an Uber, whatever way you call that,
Yeah.
and then they cancel on you and they find you somebody else?
Yes. Yeah.
You were rejected.
Yeah, I was. I
You were
was.
rejected. And you don't go, "Oh, honey, gosh darn it, I was rejected." And then you don't stay up all night long going, "The Uber driver rejected me today." So the
Mhm,
reason I was asking about driving is we're rejected all day long. You go to the grocery store or the supermarket and you're standing in line and they shut down the aisle in front of you just as you walk up. You were rejected. You were driving down the road and you hit a red light and you're like, the red light wasn't supposed to be there. You're like, by the way, you were just rejected.
yeah.
And
I called up a doctor from a referral today and then, found out that they were retired, right?
yep.
And it was and this was after I had already done all the research, everything. I was like, "Okay,
hmm
these ones look good," and it was referral, and we called, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, they retired last year."
Yeah. So
Total
here's
rejection and frustration.
So there's actually 5 elements to rejection. There's time, energy, effort, risk, and money.
Okay.
So anytime the more that you put time, energy, effort, risk, or money into something, you have the ability to be rejected. So like there's no time, energy, or effort into hailing a Uber. Like you click the
Mhm,
button and like it didn't work. There's really no time, energy, effort, or risk in a stop sign unless you're late to an appointment because you didn't plan. Like then that's when you get frustrated. And so those 5 inputs are usually the things that when I'm working with somebody and I'm why are you feeling like rejection has happened? How much time, energy, effort, risk, or money have you put in?
mhm.
And so like sometimes it's actually not rejection that people have, it's regret for not doing what they knew what they needed to do. So I
Oh, that's interesting. Can you repeat that?
yeah, so I'll give you it to in a different example to explain it a little bit differently. When I work with salespeople and I teach them a sales process and I go out and I work with them live, sometimes we'll get done with the appointment and they didn't close the deal. And they're like, oh my goodness, Scott, I feel so rejected. And I have to go time out. You can't feel rejected. You didn't do everything possible that needed to be done. What that is a feeling of regret.
Mhm.
It's regret that you didn't do whatever task that you had at hand.
Right. But we label it as rejection because we
Yeah,
probably don't wanna face that either, right?
because it's easier to go, it's somebody else's fault.
Sure,
So
sure.
everybody has the fear of I don't want to look dumb and I don't want to look silly
Mhm,
because like there's like nobody like deep down nobody wants to talk about shame. Like as a kid, like when you did something wrong and your parents like go stand in the corner or go mow the lawn, whatever your parents did to you when you got in trouble, there's that feeling of like, okay, I'm not okay. And so
Mm,
when a lot of people face rejection, some of it is shame. It's like, you know, this happened and it shouldn't have. I
mhm,
don't feel good about myself.
mhm.
And it's a natural, hey, I go through it. This isn't like I'm not like, hey, I'm Teflon Scott and nothing hurts me. Anything that I bring up, I have the same problem with. And
Yeah.
so there's times though that I have to catch myself and I'm like, I have to have like that self, Scott, you wrote about this in chapter 4 and you are living through it right now. You better knock it off.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I that's really interesting because it's making me think about when I have those negative feelings. So for example, um, for some reason, I'm just like terrified to go live on TikTok. But I know when I go live, nobody's gonna watch me. Like, because I know this is what happens. You go live and nobody's really there, and you just like hang out there, and it feels like forever, and it's been 3 minutes.
Hmm.
But there's something in me, and I know other people have experienced this too when you're supposed to go live on a platform by yourself, right? You can't, it's hard to push the button. And you're right,
It,
it's probably a lot more regret than fear of rejection.
well, and so like I have 2,600 YouTube videos
Yeah.
and I filmed a lot of them outside on purpose to put a lot of pressure on me. And we're going to go down a tangent here, but it's super important. Prior to March 2020, most people never did live video. Most people never were on video. And there was some things in March that changed everybody going live and doing things on Zoom and be live and restream and go to meeting and whatever thing you want to plan. So for the first 2 weeks of the lockdowns, let's say, um, most people would get all dressed up. They would pretend like they were going to work, and then after the first month, people were showing up in sweats and hadn't shaved in a month.
Yes.
So the business shift that happened because of March 2020 allowed people to say being on video is normal, and I understand what I sound like, and now I know what I look like. And
Mm,
so prior to that, it was a big fight to get people to do something live because they didn't want to look dumb and they didn't want to look silly. And now all of us are like, oh, you want to do a Zoom meeting? No problem, let's get it done. Because now it's been like almost 2 years of everybody doing Zoom meetings. So,
right.
like, if you take that same approach of like, I'm just going to do a business meeting, I'm just going to do a conversation. All I'm going to do is just do what needs to be done. I'm not
Right.
saying it fixes the problem, but I shot outside on purpose because I wanted that added pressure. Doing inside in a studio is easy.
Mhm.
Standing outside and hitting the record button and having somebody go, "What are you doing? Why are you here? Tell me about what your situation is," made it a lot more difficult. And and see, the thing is in a sense we're all frauds because we want things to be perfect, and by being able to not record live and being able to go and fix it, now we have the opportunity to make it perfect. But the
Mhm.
challenge is when you make something too perfect, people have an expectation of you you'll never reach.
Right. That's true.
So like I misspell all the time. Like my brain just doesn't pick up letters. It just like I type stuff and my computer beeps at me when I misspell. It's like it sounds like somebody's honking behind me sometimes. But I embrace the imperfection
Yes.
because
I'm with you.
that's what makes me unique. Well, if you're going to embrace the imperfection in shooting a video, it's not going to be perfect. And it's
Mhm.
like I've flipped through some TikToks, and one of the things that makes something interesting is a change that you're not expecting.
Mhm.
And so sometimes when you screw up, it's actually better for you. And so if you take the approach of like, I'm going to create something amazing today, and about 98% of it's going to go right, and 2% of it's going to fail, and I'm okay with that. But
Yes.
you know, um, I can't tell you the name, but I shot with a mutual friend. I shot some videos with a mutual friend, and we were filming live, and something happened in the video where people in the background screwed up. And she said, "Scott, we got to start this video over again." I said, "Nope, we're going to keep going." And she goes, "You're going to leave this in the video?" And I said, "Absolutely. Even this conversation, we're going to leave in the video.
The show must
It's
go on.
the show must go on. We're going to keep this video interesting." And then she pulled me aside and said, "Scott, I'm so used to a 2-minute video taking me 4 hours to shoot." And I said, "I'm so used to a 2-minute video taking me 2 minutes to shoot." You know,
Yes.
if you're looking for perfection, you're never going to find it. Now, different thing. If you have a media campaign and somebody's paying you and they're expecting perfection, that's a different story than a TikTok.
Mhm.
That's a completely different story than a Facebook Live. Like today,
Sure.
today I'm not perfect. Just so you know, I didn't iron my Aloha shirt.
Oh,
Okay,
no.
but like this type of thing would freak some people out. They're like, I'm not perfect
Right.
for the video. And so what happens, a long way of getting to the point, we start looking for reasons to not do it more than reasons
Mhm.
to do it. And this kind of goes back to the creativity conversation. What are the reasons why you should do it? Your message is something amazing that somebody needs to hear.
Mhm.
And if they're your tribe, if they're your group, they're going to forgive you for faux pas. They're going to forgive you for weirdness. They're going to forgive you for silliness. And if somebody's going to be super critical of something that you do, maybe it's just not the right time for them to connect with you, or maybe they're the wrong person for you.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
get caught up in ideas and concepts that mean absolutely nothing except to us, which is done
Yeah,
for our
we make stories up in our head, right? Like, I
yeah.
mean, I think we project and think, "Oh, I this person is thinking that about me," when they're not at all, but we
Yeah.
project that.
And at the end of the day, what's weird is nobody's thinking about us.
No,
That's we
we're
want
not
we
that important to them, really, we're
I'm
not.
I can tell you that on this planet right now, today you woke up and you're like, oh, I got to talk to Scott. My
Of
mom
course.
probably said, hey, something's going on. I wonder what's going on with Scott. There's probably 10 or 15 people on this planet that woke up in the morning and said, hey, what's going on with Scott? There's
Mhm.
about 7 billion people who did not wake up this morning and say, what's going on with Scott Sylvan Bell? They just
That's
weren't
right.
there.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good point, and I like how you can bring it together with the creativity, and it's not just about ideas, like, maybe we should sit down and take the creativity exercise, and I love that question you said is, come up with ideas of why you should do it, not why you shouldn't do it. So if you find
Hmm.
yourself procrastinating, just stop and do that creativity exercise, because it reminds me of, like, Tony Robbins, who talks about, having such a compelling vision that pulls you rather
Hmm.
than you just being pushed, right? That's so much more powerful. So I really like those 2 concepts together.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I don't want to be rejected. Like as a human being, I don't want to be rejected. I want my message to feel like it's important.
Mhm.
But sometimes I connect with the wrong people.
Yep.
Sometimes it's just like
Or the
I
wrong
don't.
time. Sometimes I find it's the right people at the wrong time. Like, that's sometimes why sales calls can go wrong because you don't know what's going on in their life. Maybe they just
Mhm.
had the most horrible day and you have no idea, and you just, like, walk into that little sliver of their life.
Yeah, it's a no for today, not no for forever.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a no for today, not forever. That's a good point.
And see, here's the thing: when I work with salespeople, um, there's a magic number for most people of about 2 to 400 presentations before they really start feeling their legs are underneath them in sales. And they'll come to me after 10 and they're like, yeah, Scott, this is hard. I'm like, yeah, sales is hard. It's supposed to be, or else everybody would do it. It's going to take between 2 and 400 presentations for you to feel like you're fluid.
Uh-huh.
And so every time that you fall down is like, okay, I fell down. What happened? I said it wrong. I screwed up. And even when I do sales, I don't close 100% of deals. And if I explain to you the amount of time, energy, and effort that I've put into sales and money and risk, you should say, Scott, based upon everything you should close 100% of deals,
Mhm.
right? And so, like,
Yeah.
there comes the whole thing. Like, I don't want to be judged. So, like, every chance that I get, I admit when I'm wrong. Like, and I do it for a reason because I stop the self talk. So, like, let's say you and I are having a conversation and we're talking about marketing and whatever concept we're talking about marketing, we're talking about over the top ads. And I make a remark, and it comes out that whatever I said was wrong. And you're like, Scott, actually, that's not how it works. Okay, first thing I do is I recognize and I go, okay, I'm wrong. I don't do it to be a jerk. I do it to stop my brain from the self doubt and the self talk. Like, I'm wrong in my mind means, okay, I don't have to worry about reasons why to defend my position. Like, all of a sudden, all that goes out the window. I can move on from there.
Mhm. So
And it's just,
you've developed a way to pattern interrupt, right? Just to stop that
yeah,
because you're aware, and
hmm
then you came up with that to say, "This is how I'm gonna stop myself."
yeah, because like that self talk for us is so dangerous. That self talk is like, oh, I look silly, I look dumb. Like, and I also joke after 4 times of being wrong, I get to go home. So, like, I'll I've been in meetings with clients and they'll say something and they'll go, "Hey, Scott, you're wrong." I go, "I'm wrong." And like, "That's number 2." And I said, "This meeting's over at number 4." And it usually it gets them to laugh. And then what I notice is other people start admitting in meetings that they're wrong too. And
Uh-huh.
it just breaks the barrier down for people to say, like, I'm a human being. I make mistakes. Sometimes
Right.
people love me and sometimes just people think I'm absolutely ridiculous, which
Mhm.
that can happen for a group of people.
And that's okay because
Yeah.
it's just that day, and
Yeah.
and you just move on with it. So,
I take the victories. I have this thing called an awesomeness swipe file. And
okay.
anytime that I've gotten testimonials or I've done something cool, I've hit a personal trophy, I take pictures of it and I put it in a PDF. So like when I am struggling and when I am having those bad days, because I have them, I go through my awesomeness swipe file of things that like, hey, this is something that I was able to achieve and something I was able to do.
Oh, I love that idea. That's
Yeah.
so great. That's so
So like
great.
when people try to tear me down, I'm like, you've got nothing on my awesomeness swipe file. I could
Right.
go through there.
In your
Yeah.
face, right?
Yeah. Hey,
Yes.
look at this. It's on my phone, sucker. Yeah. Yeah, so, like, if there's one thing that I can encourage people to do is just start taking your wins. Yeah, and
Mhm.
your wins are gonna be completely different than my wins. Like, I'm not married and I don't have kids. So, like, when people say, like, "What's in your the swipe file?" I don't think have anything about kids in there because I don't have any.
Mhm.
But, like, I saved a company during COVID.
Mhm.
A guy called me and said, "I need some help. My salespeople are struggling." And I went and trained his guys, and then a couple days later, he said, "Hey, thanks for the help." Um I was able to go out and change my mindset and hire more people and grow. And
Mhm.
to me, that's one of the most awesome things that I have in my swipe file is that I was able to keep people employed. Like that's one of the most important swipes in my swipe file. And the reason I say that is the things that are important to you may not make sense to somebody else. Like there's really
Mhm.
cool things that I've done in my lifetime, but being able to save somebody's job, save somebody's company, that like to me that's the ultimate.
Yes. And I mean, it's different from collecting testimonials and stuff you
Hmm.
need for marketing your business. Yeah, it's for you, right? It's like it's
Hmm.
your awesome journal or whatever you want to call it. And there's no judgment. It's a safe zone, right? It doesn't matter, right? What it is, because it just has to have meaning for you,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and you know what? If you have a significant person in your life, a significant other, like you could say, like, look, here's what's in my swipe file. What am I missing? Like,
Oh.
I showed a couple of friends, hey, here's what's in my awesome swipe file. What do you think I should put in here? And they gave me a good couple of ideas. And
Mhm.
then like um, right underneath it, I also keep track of my goals. So like I think those two things go hand in hand. Like here's my goals, here's my awesomeness swipe file.
I love that. Oh, I'm gonna start one. That's such a great idea. That's such
Yeah,
a great idea.
you can cut and paste testimonials. You could take pictures of events in your life.
Mhm.
There's things that something like a quote that's important to you. But this, like for the most part, this one's you centric. This is
Yes.
your universe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything you want. Oh, that's
Hmm.
so great. So, Scott, you have so much going on, and like I just love talking to you because we've been talking about so many things. I'm gonna have to listen to this over and over again because I have to take notes on like, okay, now this is what I'm gonna do. Because every time I talk to you, Scott, I have these new set of goals that I have to hit now. But how can we help you? How can I, or how can we help you right now?
You know, that's a good surprise question for me. Um, I don't really think that there's anything that I would ask, right? I would, you know what? I'm gonna give you a different answer than what you're expecting.
Okay.
Um, Today, give a random stranger a compliment.
Okay.
Right? There's not a lot of stuff in this life that I need.
I think people should give random strangers a compliment and tell them it's compliments of Scott Sylvan Bell.
You don't even have to do that. I I
And
think
then you're gonna get all these random people, like these strangers saying, "Hey, Scott, somebody told me that I look great today."
if you're gonna do that, I have my own hashtag. It's a hashtag Scott Bell is awesome, right?
There you go.
The reason I say that is there's something that it does for them, but there's also something that it does for you, and it helps us recognize that we're not alone in this world.
Mhm.
And I know that like that may sound like woo woo, but I promise you that what you get out of it is just as much as what that other person gets out of it because you don't know how much somebody's struggling that day.
That's
It
true.
could be the one thing that they needed to hear that they were like, man, somebody actually just paid attention to me today.
Yeah, I mean, I think Well, like you said before, nobody's thinking about us, but it's true because
Hmm.
everybody's going around and whether we admit it or not, they're thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've definitely had that situation when I was on sales calls and then, you know, and I show up and I can tell something's wrong, but I
Hmm.
don't really know what happened. And like I remember one, like the lady was so rude. I mean, I don't wanna say she was, like, mean because she was having a horrible day, but then, as I was leaving, because it was, like, one of the worst calls ever, was not like, nothing worked, right? And then
Yeah.
when I was turning to leave, she told me that her mother died that morning, and she only kept this appointment because, like, that's what she does, she keeps appointments. And then she
Yeah.
just started crying, right? And so you never know what's happening.
So
You
I,
just
I
you
just
really
have
don't.
so when I was flying out here on Wednesday, I came out here on Wednesday. There was a lady, and she looked like she was just struggling. And we all know when somebody has just got there, they don't feel like they're on their game because I have that
Mhm.
too.
Yes.
And she had a nice Louis Vuitton purse. It could have been a Flouis, it could have been a fake Louis, but I looked at her and said, "Hey, that's a nice Louis. That's a nice
Mhm.
purse." And then like it wasn't flirting, it wasn't interested, and then she just got a big smile on her face because like that was the one thing she wanted people to see that she had. Like we
Right.
all have trophies. Like I wear Aloha shirts every day, and if somebody comes up to me and says, "Nice Aloha shirt," I'm like, "Fantastic." You
Yes.
know, if you're into a band and like someone's wearing a Metallica shirt from their tour in 1994, you're like, "Hey, I was there too." People are just looking for that connection. They're looking for like, I'm alive. Just tell me I'm valuable and that I'm important for a few seconds of life.
Yeah.
So that's my
Okay.
challenge. That's the one thing that I'm going to ask for me.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So everybody listening, this is our homework. Go and give somebody a stranger a compliment, just a random stranger a compliment, and it's optional if you want to tell them it's from Scott Sylvan Bell.
Yeah,
And number two, I'm going to add this too. Here's where you can find Scott. His website is howtosell.live. So
yeah.
LIV, and I'll put that in the description as well.
Thank you.
So, thanks so much for hanging out with me today, Scott. It was really great to catch up.
Absolutely. And if
Okay,
there's
well,
ever anything that you need, let me know.
I will. We need to do this again sometime.
Cool. Thanks, Liana. Actually, I should say aloha.